You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Episode 97, The Paradox.
Welcome to The Paradox with your attending, Dr. Eric Larson. He is a practicing anesthesiologist and clinical assistant professor at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. Listen in as he takes you behind the scenes of what practicing medicine in today's ever-changing world is like with another doctor. The Paradox is a fun and accidentally informative show for physicians, patients, or anyone who has ever found themselves in a waiting room.
Welcome to The Paradox. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Larson. Thank you for joining me as we explore the U.S. medical system in a fun, informative format through expert analysis. And today's expert is Dr. Jeff Avalone, a periodontist in Monroe, Louisiana. And we're finally going to break from talking about COVID and talk about something entirely different on a topic that I found very interesting and peripherally related to medicine. But this is really for anyone who is a high-income earner and is curious about what to do for income. Specifically, we're going to talk about passive income in real estate. What that exactly means. What does this mean? You're a landlord? Does this mean that you just find buildings to buy? Exactly what is it? And Dr. Avalone is an expert in this. He's been doing it for 4 or 5 years now, has his own website that he helps people navigate and understand the process of passive real estate income creation. Now, partway through the interview, my microphone pooped out, and you'll find that the audio changes a little bit. Not quite sure why this is happening, except that to say that my laptop is finally meeting its end and a new one is in the box and it just needs to be set up. So I expect that my editing and the risk of losing interviews will go down dramatically with my new laptop and increased computing speed. So I apologize for that. You may not even notice, but anyway, it's not up to the usual high quality, but it will be back the way in a couple interviews from now. As always, I'd like to thank all of you for listening, for sharing the show, especially certain episodes on COVID. I can see that it's extremely popular, and we will get back to discussing COVID when something comes out as far as new information or we are able to crystallize things a little bit better. As you know, it's ever evolving, and so it's just kind of nice to take a break temporarily, talk about some other things with medicine. We've got a great interview next week that relates back again to pharmaceutical pricing. But without further ado, Dr. Jeff Avalone and our discussion on whether or not you have to become a landlord to make passive income through real estate. Enjoy. Hey, I'm here with my new friend, Dr. Jeff Avalone. He's a full-time practicing periodontist in the great state of Louisiana and author and founder of DebtFreeDoctor.com. His focus is on helping doctors and other high-income professionals create passive income from real estate so they don't have to stop trading their time for money. And I can't tell you how excited I am to not be talking about COVID-19 this week. So, Dr. Avalone, thank you so much for joining the show.
My pleasure, sir. Happy to be here.
Well, this is a great break. It's been a while since I've talked finance on the show, and so it's kind of fun to get away from all the medical stuff. But I think, important thing when we look at medicine and is that you work in many ways to earn income, that the nice thing is to try and reach this financial independence. We've talked about this before on the show other times, and you do that by making your money work for you, right? That's always the smart people are the ones who end up not having to toil, I guess, for their income all the time, right? And have other ways of generating income. So why don't you just talk to basically how you kind of got into this business or line of thinking?
Sure. Actually, it just kind of happened by chance. Probably most people on this show have always had like a goal, when you're in college, your goal, if you're a physician or dentist, was to get into medical school or dental school. Mm-hmm. And then you accomplish that goal. And then your goal is to maybe get into a residency program or, if you're an attorney or whatever your goals are. So I had set up a goal that I wanted to come back and practice in my hometown of Louisiana, Monroe, Louisiana. So unfortunately, about 2 weeks before I finished my training, the group I was supposed to join basically pulled the deal out from under me. Ugh. And it was a little tough because we had already purchased a home, interest only.
Yeah.
Had a 2-month-old, and myself, I had close to $300,000 student loan debt. Ugh. With no clue how to start a practice, run a business. They don't teach us anything like that. So
Yeah.
needless to say, it was a little bit stressful. So I think I made it like a switch at that time, my thoughts on money, because I always, I had all this debt accumulating, but I always thought, I'm going to have a pretty, decent income, and it's really not going to be that big of a deal to pay it off. It's not like I'm going to be making 20,000 a year. I mean, 6 figures. So
Right.
never really thought much about it. But when this happened, I went from, kind of just cruising on to almost like this, really feared scarcity, sort of mode. And I really took me a while to get out of that scarcity mindset. So I luckily networked with some local people here, and they took me under their wing, taught me how to run a business. I rented space from them. I actually went back to doing what I used to do in college and high school. And that was mow yards. And I'll never forget, I knocked on the door of this lady. I, did her yard for like 18 years and said, hey, you remember me? And she's like, yeah, I remember you. So I just let you know if you need your yard mowed this summer, I'm your guy. She said, well, son, aren't you supposed to be a doctor by now? I said, I am, but I'm broke.
The lawn doctor. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. The lawn doctor. So some days I wish I still was the lawn doctor, but anyway, so we set a goal at that time to try to be out of debt by in like, I don't know, I think I said 8 years or 10 years. And so that put me on a path, and luckily we were able to do it in 7 years. But, and we also hit some other financial goals, and it was kind of like, okay, now what?
Right.
And I was like, there's more, there's gotta be more to this than just, getting out of debt and having some money, So I was skiing with my wife and my kids. I think they were in ski school in Beaver Creek, and we got off the ski lift, and like there was a ski school and I had a kid like dart out in front of me, and I had to swerve so I didn't, kill him, and I fell. And when I fell, I kind of caught myself on my right side. I hurt my wrist and my arm, and I got up, and my wife's like, "You okay, Jeff?" So like, "Yeah, I'm fine." I'm kind of making sure my hand it's not broken, or a wrist. And
right.
at that point, I started thinking, and, you never think about getting hurt or injured.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, if I'm injured, what am I to how am I going to provide for my family? And I realized that my whole focus was on my active income. And that started me down the path of looking for other ways to bring in income. But I didn't want to get another job or take off more time away from my family. So I have kids and I want to spend time with them. So long story short, if you start looking online about passive income, you're probably going to see a lot about real estate. Mm-hmm. And you could either go the active route or the passive route. And we decided on going the passive route, and wound up starting the blog, debtfreedr.com. And now I'm, kind of like you, love to teach other people what I'm learning along the way.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I mean, I guess, we don't usually think about income as either passive or active. I mean, I think it's easy to think, I think you just think of it as income, but it's definitely a different mindset, right? Like how you're acquiring whatever it is, whether you're actively doing something or, well, I mean, I guess it's fair to say that passive is not really totally passive, right? So how do you separate passive and active? Because clearly you have to be doing something and have, some sort of coordination with your passive income streams to make money.
Right. And I think that's where the misconception, people tell you, oh, you can get all this mailbox money and you have to do anything, which,
right,
as you know, is not true. So with the active income, if you're a physician or a dentist or, whatever, somewhere where you go to work, and if you don't show up, you don't get paid, you have a job. And, Robert Kiyosaki says that job stands for just over broke. So you're basically just trading time for money.
Right.
Like me, if I take off a week from my practice and go skiing or whatever, I don't get paid. So that is what I term active income, basically just trading dollars for time. Most people do this. And you're either, even if you own your own business, which everybody's like, I'm going to own my own business, I'm going to own my own practice. Well, you still are trading time for money. You're still, doing that. That's active income. And probably most people know that active income is I'm not an accountant or anything like that, but it is the highest taxed income out there. So not only are you, trading your precious time, which you can never get back, but you're getting taxed the most. And that's what we're all focused on. Just was reading something the other day, and I never really thought about this, but when you meet somebody the first time and you start and talk to them or whatever, what do they typically ask you?
What do you do?
Yeah. What do you do, or what do you do for a living? What do you do? What do you do? And we're focused on that. And that's right. That's all we do is we do stuff. We work. We're trained to think like that. Instead of, it should be the other way around. What do you own? It's owning things that produce the passive income that is eventually will get you to financial freedom. So and it's really a mindset shift. And most of the time, myself included, wasn't taught that. And once you start learning about it and learn how it works, and it's pretty impressive. So that's the active part. To answer the second part of your question regarding the passive, basically the passive income comes from purchasing assets. So you're going to have to work. You're going to have active income coming in. The more active income you have coming in, the more you can purchase assets such as real estate that are going to pay you passively over time. So you got to put in the work, which, that we're already doing that to begin with.
Right.
But that's the difference. Now, the passive income is taxed a lot less. It's capital gains tax versus the active income. Okay.
And, you mentioned two things earlier on that I think were important. One is the scarcity mindset, and I'd like you to expand on that briefly. What do you mean by that, and how you were living? Is that just the thought that I've got to scrimp and save all the time, and even once you get to the point where you've sort of gotten out of debt and you no longer are watching you've got your job now, you've got your income, and so you don't have that financial calamity around the corner like you did initially with your career, that you're still worried about that, and so you still kind of behave as if you're broke?
Yeah, well, your wife probably, as she's a pediatrician, she can probably remember reading studies or can attest to this, that most of us do have a scarcity mindset. It starts from how we're raised as a child. I know when I was raised, blue collar, good folks, and we never wanted for anything. We had the basics covered, but my dad worked at a hardware store, which he still does right now, that his dad started. So, blue collar, hardworking, typical, American family. But growing up, we always heard that's too expensive. Mm-hmm. We can't afford that. It must be nice to go on a vacation like them. It was always about a negative imprint of money. And we start having that mindset, and we're just ingrained in that obviously we don't have enough to buy this, that obviously there's only so much to go around. Mm-hmm. And we learned that from a young age. And I did. And I catch myself occasionally saying that around my kids too. And I have to tell them, what, there's plenty of money. I mean, look what the government starts to run out of money. What have they done during the pandemic? They just print more of it, right?
Yeah. I've tried doing that in my basement. I've told that's not allowed. And the other thing you mentioned, which I thought was interesting too, is you were talking about the debt, that once you got out of debt, you sort of were lost, right? You sort of had, you had a goal, but you didn't think beyond that one goal. Like you assumed you would achieve it, but then you never thought what you'd do after you had achieved that goal. It wasn't like part of a ladder. It was sort of like the end, and then right. You're lost. How did you sort of get around that? Is that something you see a lot of people struggle with?
I think we're seeing it more and more. Take Dave Ramsey, for instance, one of the largest well-known financial gurus out there. Well, he's always talked about and focused his show on what, helping people get out of debt.
Right.
And, I followed his 7 baby steps, and he helped us along the way. But the more and more people that he was helping, they started calling in and saying, okay, Dave, great, we're debt free. And then they would do the debt free screen.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, they would call back and went, Dave, okay, we're debt free. What now? What do we do? And it's kind of like, and I remember years ago at our church, we, the pastor played a video of Tom Brady after he won. I don't know. He's won so many Super Bowls, but one of the Super Bowls he won, and he got the MVP. And literally, he just won. They go down on the field, and they're interviewing him. And Tom is great. You just won. He's got the MVP. You have to feel great right now. And literally, and you could probably find this on YouTube. He's like, yeah, it's great, but he's like, if this is all there is to it, he's like, there's got to be more to it than that. And it's like, well, God, you just you just won the Super Bowl and you're MVP, or you're not satisfied, So, to me, I kind of had that feeling because I was just so focused on, and a lot of people were so focused on one thing, whether it's getting out of debt or saving $1 million or whatever it is. We don't think beyond that because, as human beings, we're not really, our brains, when we were initially evolved, we weren't really geared towards long-term. It was more like, hey, we got to survive right now. And that's why so many people, don't save for retirement because they can't think, well, 40 years from now. It's like now, hey, I got this extra money. Am I going to save it or go buy, a car or whatever? I'm gonna go buy a car. That's more fun,
Yeah.
So I think that's when I shifted to just kind of like you said, not having that laddered approach, having multiple goals and focusing like that.
And then let's talk about passive income. And your specialty is real estate. Why don't you just walk through what your recommendations are, or I guess how you sort of approach the problem? Because when I think of people investing in real estate, I think of a couple of things that are maybe simple. You buy a rental property, like a house or an apartment building, or you flip houses, and those are sort of like my thoughts of what. And I would consider flipping houses not very passive, but
exactly.
So how do you just have someone help someone just kind of get started in this process, and what are they looking for?
Sure, and I was the same way. When I'm reading about the real estate, I was like, okay, well, I've got to go purchase real estate and learn how to be a landlord. And I went to conferences, I networked with people. I've got several friends here in town that they do that full time. And the more I talked to them and saw the phone calls they're getting from tenants, and I'm like, I don't think this is for me. So I think you should sit down, and if you're married, sit down with your spouse and just figure out what your goals are. And those goals for us really guided us because we wanted passive income, but I wanted more time to spend with our kids before they move off to college.
Right.
So active investing, flipping houses, managing apartments, managing homes, you're the landlord. So that's out for us. I don't want another job, which led me to find passive income, which I didn't even know existed until I started learning about it and learning about something called syndications. And I'm like, what is all this? And it's almost like you find this other network of people, and there's a whole networking of people that just invest in apartment syndications. I didn't even know it was out there, So, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do is get the word out on my blog of what's out there. The information that I learn on a weekly basis, I sort through it and put on the blog, and it's more geared towards higher income people that want to obtain financial freedom. And if they want to keep working, that's fine. But at least you have options to do that or not.
I guess explain the syndication, because I've never heard this term before. What would an example of a syndication? How do you find these things, and what does it mean?
A syndication is nothing more than pooling your money with other people to purchase something that you couldn't otherwise do on your own. Perfect example is an apartment complex. Most people don't have, $5, $10, $20 million in the bank. So you put up your money with somebody else. There's a group called a syndicator, and they're the ones that find properties. They and they're looking through a lot of deals, and then they purchase them, they manage them. And while you have your investment with them, you're getting money or distributions along the way, which is basically tax-free because of the tax benefits you get. So most of those come quarterly. Some of them are monthly. So in a typical hold period is 5 to 7 years. So for 5 to 7 years, you're getting a check every month or every quarter, literally tax-free. And at the end of that investment, that group will sell that apartment complex, and you get to split the profit with them. Now that part is typically tax, but most of these are set up what's called a 2x equity multiple. So you're basically going to double your money for most of these over that 5 or 7 year period. So for instance, if you put in $100,000 today, 5 to 7 years later, after the property turns over, you can expect that 100 to turn into 200. It's really hard to get that anywhere else, especially in the stock market these days. But I encourage people to really seek out the most important thing is to seek out a group that you can trust, because that's the most important thing. It's not the returns. It's not how pretty the pictures look of the apartments or anything like that. It's who is going to be doing the due diligence, who's going to be managing it for you. So once you get that, find some that you can trust, then it makes it a lot easier to invest in the future.
With the syndicates, I guess the example is that you're sort of like a venture capital group. I know that they'll purchase properties for 7 years, then they with the intention of selling them after 7 years, and they operate different ways to sort of make money within that 7 year period. But then also, you're essentially kind of like a bank instead of you putting down 10% towards a building, you find 10 people put down 10%. You're now a group purchasing a building or property, right? And that's sort of what this is. How do you find these groups? I mean, do you Google syndicate, or how do you find these?
That's a good question. And I did that initially, and I lost a lot of money.
Oh.
I didn't know what I was doing. I started off with some small deals that I did online with some of these companies that, I don't want to mention any companies, but if you just Google passive real estate, you'll see some of the main companies.
Sure.
And they think about it. They have all these people pitching them deals every month, and they just kind of pick and choose what they want, and they put them up on their website. So you don't know who you're dealing with. Right. And that's what I did for the first 7 or 8, it's called crowdfunding. So the first 7 or 8 deals I did, some of them worked out, some of them didn't. And I had one that just completely flopped because you don't know who you're dealing with.
Sure.
And it takes a lot of, for me, it finally took going to events, networking with people, asking other people, hey, who do you invest with? And then, asking them, who do you invest with? And you'll eventually start hearing kind of the same, kind of like if I came to your town and was like, hey, my brakes are out. Where can I go get some, who's a good mechanic? And you would tell me somebody, and maybe I'd ask 4 or 5 other people. And you kind of start hearing that same, go to, Bobby's Brakes down the street. And, he's the guy, he's the brake guy. So luckily I was able to find a couple of groups to invest with, and those are the ones that I usually recommend whenever deals come out to people on my website.
So you're not talking about people who are local, right? I mean, these are people who do this nationally.
Yes, most of the deals that I invest in are in the Southeast, United States, and on the East Coast, in Carolinas, Texas, Florida, places like that, where the growth is just, really, really tons of growth, a lot of good jobs. You can charge what you want and rent. And, but again, that's the best syndicators. That's where they're going. They're not going to California or New York where the rents are sky high. They're going to where, you can make a profit.
Okay. So it just takes a little bit of networking and finding that, and I guess that one of the services I guess you have on your website, right, is that you provide people access to these sorts of groups.
Yeah, I recommend, I recommend the people that I personally invest with on the site.
So you were debt free after 7 years. You had, let's see, you said you had $300,000 debt. I'm sure you had other expenses and stuff, but how long have you been doing this, I guess, is the first question. And then do you find that from an income standpoint compared to what your active income, what's the difference?
I have been investing in real estate about 4 years now. And I'm working on, because at that time I had about 100% in the market, our investments, typically in index funds with, the 401k deal, what most of us have.
Passive.
But I wanted, what's that?
Passive, right?
Yeah. But I wanted to diversify, and I wanted to have something to where, if you wait until you can access your 401k, well, you got to be close to, 59 and a half, 60 years old. Well, I didn't want to work that long. So again, having passive income real estate gives you options. So if you do choose to retire at 50 or 55 or whatever earlier, then you can access that money if you want to. So that kind of led me to diversify into real estate. And basically all I've done is just taken our household expenses monthly. And once your passive income pays for that, you're good to go.
Okay.
You don't have to, that's kind of a different mindset, because you don't have to save up what the financial advisors tell you, 5 million or 10 million. You just need enough to cash flow your monthly expenses.
Right. Yeah. That is a totally different way to sort of look at things, where well, that's the financial independence people talk about, right? That's where you're sort of working for fun or for, whatever other goals you might want to have financially. Mm-hmm. When you mentioned earlier about taxes, explain how there's a tax advantage to this sort of investing versus, I don't know, you're investing in the stock market, for instance. I mean, what you said, there's the tax is a lot less. It's just capital gains. You're talking about the eventual sale at year 7 or something of these ventures, right? But how do you gain income with pretty much tax-free in the meantime?
Yeah, it's a good question. And if anyone eventually does do some sort of investments, real estate, make sure before you do it, you get your accountant involved so they know and they can set up, different tax structures. But, before you, go head on. And I'm not an accountant or anything, but just from my experience, the tax, not to get all deep into it or whatever, but basically when you get your distributions, basically your mailbox money, that money comes to you. And because of the way that the structure is, when the syndication buys an apartment building, they're able to depreciate, and that's where you get your tax benefits. So when you get that money, and you get your K-1 from them at the end of the year, which is just a tax form, 1 page you'll give to your accountant, it'll typically show a loss. And that's one of the great things that the IRS allows us is to depreciate. And actually they have bonus depreciation now, which actually you can depreciate a whole lot more initially during that first, few years than you have to spread it out over 15 years or whatever. So think about if you had money in a mutual fund and you pull money out, you would have to pay taxes on that. So not only so let's say you put money into a mutual fund, not in a retirement, not in a 401k, but right. you take $10,000 and you go put it in a Vanguard mutual fund. So if you want to take that money out, you got to pay capital gains taxes on that. So not only are you taxed before you put it in at your active income level, then the tax man is going to tax you when you take it out right. as well. So with this, your tax, it's tax free. So when you start using it, it's tax free. And when you kind of figure out and do some numbers, what it would take to build up enough money and investments to take it out to equal that, I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling.
So someone could counter and say, well, when it comes to depreciation, it basically means that you buy some asset, it goes into disrepair, right? And that's sort of the thinking behind, right? So that you have to pay for upkeep and things like that. Like everyone's home depreciates over time, although the property becomes more valuable sometimes too, but you're always putting money in, fixing the roof or whatever it might be.
Right.
And so if you depreciate a building over 7 years, and then you say, let's say you bought it for $1 million and you then are selling it for 2, but you've depreciated it $500,000 in the 7 years. I don't know what the real rules are, but let's say, so your capital gains would be $1.5 million on that sale, wouldn't it? So don't you kind of end up paying the tax in the back end afterwards, even though you've been claiming the depreciated gains, I guess, along the way?
Yeah, you would pay the taxes on whenever the profit of that sale, and it's based on how much money that you invested, you put in. But there's other ways that you can do, such as a 1031 exchange. And again, I don't want to get into all the details, but you could actually take the profits. You could take your money when it sells, and if you follow a certain timeline and you're able to, within 180 days, take that money and buy another one or invest in another property, you can defer those taxes. And you can actually just keep deferring it until basically you die. So you never have to pay taxes on it if you know what you're doing. So it's pretty impressive. And that's why I encourage you to get somebody involved, accountant that knows what they're doing, that could do this, because it's pretty huge.
And are you having people form their own LLCs for this sort of thing, or you just have to be very careful with your accounting?
You don't have to, but I think most people do, just because of that added protection benefit. So when you invest in a syndication, you're investing in an LLC that owns that building. So you have a share of that LLC already. So it doesn't really matter if you do or not, but just sometimes people like to do it. But it doesn't help you with taxes. It's more for litigation standpoint if someone were to sue you.
Yeah, right. I mean, and that, for those not, LLC would be shorthand for limited liability corporation. So what is looking at your life now, and when it comes to making money, how do you view your job now, where you're a periodontist, versus how you looked at it, say, when you started? I mean, after you actually started weren't mowing lawns anymore.
It's actually, once you get to the point where you've paid off your debt and you have other money coming in, it's amazing how you look at your job or your profession. And sometimes people come in and they need work done, and they're good, hardworking people, and they really want it, but they can't afford it. So it's just nice to do it for free. I don't have to worry about paying all these all these bills. I still have bills, of course. Bills never go away, but having a ton of debt to pay off, and it's just a good feeling. And that really makes me the happiest is when I am able to give back, whether it's my time or money, to people. So that allows you that option to do that if you choose.
The freedom to express your generosity well, that's the whole point of financial independence, movement, is that you have the ability to do sort of whatever it might be that you're interested in, or at least the ability to walk away if you have to from your job, or whatever the situation might be.
I mean, if I had, let's say, take $10,000. I mean, you can take I have a family of 4. You could go on a nice trip for $10,000, or I could go and buy a nice side by side and go hunting in or whatever. But to me, I get more joy, having and sharing an experience with my family than I do just from buying stuff. Well, that's just me, but having passive income and other streams of income coming in allow me to do that without having to worry so much about, taking off work as much as I used to.
What's been the response to you setting up your website and sort of your, I guess, I don't know if I'd call it a business properly at this point, sort of, I guess is, but a hobby. What has been your response from other physicians and dentists, and what kind of interesting stories you have from people you've talked to?
Well, it's really amazing how many older physicians and dentists have no money saved. And after talking to them, I've talked to, I don't know, probably hundreds of them, either via email or on the phone. I talked to them. I think I have 5 calls this week with some, because they're, they want to know more about it and that. And I think that's what's most eye-opening is they make a ton of money, but they have not been real good with their money. And it's really fun. I actually talked with a radiologist last week from Phoenix, and I think an ER doctor, an anesthesiologist. Anyway, they were young. They were in their 30s. So I was really catching them young. That's when I really get excited, because I was like telling them, hey, look, if I could go back in time, I would have focused everything I could, of course, after getting out of consumer debt, but really focused on getting to, sort of that financial freedom part first. And then if you want to keep working, or you want to open up multiple offices, or you want to expand your business or do something else, you can do that later in life. But, work on freeing up your time, and that way you'll be able to spend time with your kids. Because, I mean, as you know, in the blink of an eye, they're gone.
Yeah. No, I know very, very well about that. What do you think for people who are starting out? So you said your view is that you want to get those people to initially, I guess, the question is, do you have them focus on the getting out of debt, or do you say that's the first step and then there's more beyond that? So you have actually, goals beyond.
If everybody's different, but if they have a lot of consumer debt, like credit card debt and, high car loans and, even some of the student loans, I typically recommend that they clean that up first. And that's just my recommendation. Some other people would say don't, but that's what I recommended. And then from there, work, and I kind of help them through looking at things, different goals, maybe a 5-year goal or 10-year goal or whatever. But because we're so focused on just investing in a 401k, most of us, or IRA or whatever.
Right. And
we're thinking, well, we got to work for 40 years and hopefully we'll save up enough money so when we retire, we don't run out. And that's the quote traditional retirement model that we're fed our whole life. But being from Louisiana, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So I give them that. You can do that, but you can also do something to where you focus early on at making good money. The more money you make, again, the more you can purchase assets that start making you money early on in life. And that's kind of that snowball effect. So when you get to be 40, 45, or 50, well, then you've got all these streams of income coming in, plus your day job too. Instead of waiting the other way, waiting to the end when you're 60 or 65 going, I need to do something.
Right. Well, and I would think in general, at that point in your life, if you've not been doing that, you're going to be much more hesitant and risk averse. And the likelihood of you trying different things is when you have a pool of money that you can't really increase a lot through actively working, you're probably much more hesitant about entering those sort of ventures. What do you say to people who say, well, this sounds great, but you've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, and the housing market's been great for a number of those years, but there wasn't that long ago that the housing market was really bad. In fact, it totally collapsed, and people could look at it and say, well, the same conditions that were present back then are actually even potentially even worse now. That there's more of a debt-fueled bubble with real estate, both commercial and residential. What do you say to that argument to people who might be concerned about that, as that this might be a risky sort of venture?
Well, just like anything in life, there's risk, and I think it was Warren Buffett that said, "Never invest in anything that you can't explain to a 5th grader." So, and unless you know what you're getting into, don't do it. And you just educate yourself, and you realize that I don't care what happens, debt bubble or whatever, people have to have a place to live. And they always have, and there's going to be ups and downs, just like if you put your money in the market, there's going to be ups and downs. So
right.
if you know what you're doing and you surround yourself with good people that can educate you, then you should do a lot better than trying to go on it on your own. Because I tell people, focus on what you know best, whether it's a physician, dentist, attorney, accountant, engineer, whatever. You focus on that, and then surround yourself with other people that can help you with the other part. And that's one of the goals of my blog, is to help get the information out there. And there's plenty of other blogs, like mine as well. It's just finding a few that you like, finding podcasts that you like, such as your podcast, and then just educating yourself and make it a point. If you have a 30-minute commute every day, or you're on the treadmill for an hour or whatever, well, that's perfect time to educate yourself.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Anzalone, thanks so much for being on the Paradox. Are there any parting words, or I guess aside from debtfreedoctor.com, where people can find more of your things, are you on social media that they can follow, Twitter and Facebook and the like?
Yeah, they can actually go to debt-free. I tried to get the debtfreedoctor.com, but it was taken. So it's actually debtfreedr.com /free guide for your listeners. And they can download a free guide that basically teaches them the basics on how to get started with passive income.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, and have a great evening.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening to The Paradox. If you like what the doc is doing, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And share the show with your friends. Become a supporting listener to get access to special bonuses at patreon.com/theparadox. Show notes can be found at theparadox.com.